Ghislaine Maxwell was transferred to a new federal correctional facility 4 days after meeting up with a lawyer from the government. Now, allegations and witness statements from ex-prisoners who were serving time with Maxwell are coming out, saying that Ghislaine is connected to someone powerful. 7 years after the death of convicted offender Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell is still refusing to speak. And for the first time, we might have an idea why. Another high-profile prisoner was Ghislaine Maxwell. Did you have any interactions with her? I had interactions with her, limited interactions with her. I worked at recreation, right? And so she would come in and work at recreation, or work to work out. But her experience there is very different from anyone else's. Even Elizabeth and I, she is treated very differently there. And I didn't have a lot of interaction with her. It was just on a very, she would come over and talk to us, or I would see her if she would, come by recreation. But and honestly, I chose that. I chose to have very limited interaction with her. She made it very publicly known, well, at least to, Elizabeth and I, that there's no remorse there. And again, I obviously don't know all the details of the case or whatever, but we know enough. It was a lot when the victims would be on TV and talking. She was just complete disregard for them, and this is when they are pouring their hearts out in front of Congress and for this files to be released and stuff. And so to see that kind of behavior when there are real victims that you're seeing and what they've gone through, and to be so dismissive of that just didn't sit with me the right way. On the 28th of June 2022, Ghislaine Maxwell was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for sex trafficking-related crimes tied to Jeffrey Epstein. The sentence covered her role in recruiting, grooming, and facilitating the abuse of underage individuals over about a decade tonight. And if he likes you, then you'll be a real masseuse, and you'll get to see the world, and you'll get paid $200 per massage. And no alarm bells went off, but because Ghislaine seemed so proper, surely it's got to be legit. Her posh upbringing, her accent gave this veneer of respectability. Coming from a woman, I think that was incredibly manipulative, and I think it was absolutely critical in Epstein's operation. My dad brought me over. He shakes hand with Ghislaine, who promises that she'll take good care of me, and she will have someone drive me home. These victim statements not only directly implicate Maxwell, but they also prove just how well connected she actually was. Several victims have said that the only reason they ever believed her lies was because she was friends with politicians or billionaires near them. Women from the UK described seeing Ghislaine Maxwell hang out with members of the royal family, while victims from the US say that Ghislaine had photographs of her with Hillary and President Bill Clinton. President Bill Clinton has confirmed this under oath, saying that he was closer to Ghislaine Maxwell than Jeffrey Epstein because of her close relationship with the Rothschild family. She was very good friends with Evelyn Rothschild and his wife Lynn, whom I knew and was in regular touch with. During Miss Maxwell's interview, she stated that President Clinton was her friend, not Epstein's friend. Is that accurate? I'd say that it was accurate to say that I felt closer to her than him. And for the record, why was that? Because I had seen her more, and because she was very good friends with Elon Rothschild and his wife Lynn, whom I knew and was in regular touch with. Not only that, but Representative Pat Fallon recently questioned Hillary Clinton and asked her the question the media is too scared to ask. Why was Ghislaine Maxwell at her daughter Chelsea Clinton's wedding after the conviction? Her answer under oath: she was just a +1. A +1 at your daughter's wedding after all of it. Politics. So, take us behind closed doors. What was Hillary's demeanor like? She got fluffed up pretty well, looking pretty good there. So, how did it go down? Well, I'd never actually seen Laura. I'd never seen her in person. And she was certainly agitated. She was trying to be a little charming to the Democratic staff, and that even fell flat. She's a very icy person, interestingly enough, but nonetheless, she was trying to distance herself from Jeffrey Epstein and Maxwell. Obviously, as she just said, she said she never met Epstein. She was just casual with Maxwell. So I asked her a question. just casual. You've met hundreds of thousands of people. Your daughter gets married in 2010. You have to distill these hundreds of thousands of people down to 250. There were 500 at the wedding. There's going to be a groom. So 250 Clinton invites. And guess who shows up as an invited guest? Ghislaine Maxwell. And she said, well, she just was a +1. I said, so that's your testimony under oath that it's just an odd coincidence that old Mom Maxwell was there. Things that make you go, do we know who, wait, what was she? Was she Epstein's +1? Forgive me for not knowing that. No, Epstein didn't go. He had been convicted of count. As a result of her crimes, Ghislaine was transferred to a federal prison in Florida, where she was supposed to spend the rest of her sentence. However, while in this prison, Maxwell was visited by the Deputy Attorney General and the current Acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche. Just days after this meeting, Maxwell was suddenly transferred to a minimum security federal prison camp in Bryan, Texas. The Texas facility is a women's prison camp with dormitory housing, limited or no perimeter fencing, and a lower staff-to-inmate ratio than her previous prison. Attorney General Todd Blanche said that Maxwell deserved a safer prison, but this might just be the first time that someone as dangerous as her is sent somewhere so nice. Couple more, and we're almost out of time. I do want to ask you about Ghislaine Maxwell, who was of course convicted in 2021 for her role in helping Jeffrey Epstein traffic his victims. In July, you interviewed her in Florida, where she was serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison. Just a week later, Maxwell was moved to a more permissive prison camp in Texas. Why was she moved just days after you interviewed her, Mr. Blanche? So that's a Bureau of Prison Security issue that I will not talk about. Did you have anything to do with it? Let me finish. First of all, I am responsible for the Bureau of Prisons. So every decision that they make lands on my desk to the extent it needs to. But just let me talk about the security issue. At the time that I met Miss Maxwell, there was a tremendous amount of scrutiny and publicity towards her, and the institution she was in. She was suffering numerous threats against her life. So the BOP is not only responsible for putting people in jail and making sure they stay in jail, but also for their safety. And so she was moved. She is in federal prison. She was in federal prison before. She's in federal prison now. She's doing 20 years because she was convicted. And the fact that she was moved, she might be moved to another institution tomorrow if security requires it. And that's true of any federal inmate across this country. Ghislaine Maxwell's new camp has tons of benefits, including her own puppy and unlimited access to the internet. One of the inmates at her prison said that her experience there is very different from anyone else's. She is treated very differently there. She made it known there's no remorse there. When the victims would be on TV and talking, she had complete disregard for them when they were pouring their hearts out in front of Congress and for the files to be released. Ghislaine Maxwell, in her own words, describing life in her new prison home. I feel like I have dropped through Alice in Wonderland's looking glass, she writes of federal prison camp Bryan, according to emails she sent to friends and family reviewed by NBC News. I am much happier here, she writes. Maxwell is serving a 20-year sentence for recruiting minors to be sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. The emails obtained by the House Judiciary Committee investigating allegations of special treatment written by Maxwell after an abrupt and unusual transfer from a low-security facility in Florida to this all-women's camp in Texas, typically reserved for white-collar criminals. The move came amid backlash over the DOJ and FBI announcement in July that a review found no incriminating client list. Soon after, Maxwell met with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Did you know of the existence of any such list? There is no list. Days later, she was transferred and writing emails gushing over her improved conditions. The food is legions better. The place is clean. The staff responsive and polite, she wrote, saying in another, you were not allowed to steal, beat people up, and attack them with homemade weapons. The Justice Department, which oversees federal prisons, declined to comment. Maxwell's attorney saying in a statement, It's time to get over the fact that she's in a safer facility. We should want that for everyone. The family of abuse survivor Virginia Roberts Jupri, who later died by suicide, saying we strongly reject the notion that a convicted childer should reside in a residential neighborhood shielded by fences instead of bars. The fact that one of the worst pedophiles in the last 2 decades is being given so many benefits is insane. Several inmates have reported that the guards follow Maxwell's commands and no one is allowed to say no to her. Maxwell is even allowed to watch TV alone in the staff room. Inmates who try to report Maxwell's illegal benefits are punished and transferred to higher security prisons. CNN has learned that Ghislaine Maxwell has been getting special treatment inside of a minimum security prison in Texas, where she's currently serving 20 years for child sex trafficking. Sources who are familiar with Maxwell's life inside prison tell us that she has unlimited access to toilet paper, for example. The typical inmate gets just 2 rolls per week. At one point, she was getting her meals and mail delivered to her cell. She's also been allowed to use the chaplain's office inside the chapel for guest visiting outside of visitation hours. And Maxwell's arrival at this prison has really had a chilling effect on the other inmates there. We're told that the warden at the prison had a town hall where she basically told all the inmates, do not talk about Maxwell. And one inmate who did talk to a reporter was reprimanded and sent out of Bryan to a higher security prison. And we are told that this kind of thing has happened to several other inmates. The Bureau of Prisons tells CNN that this is not special treatment, but necessary treatment given how high-profile Maxwell is and the threats that have been made to Maxwell's life. It's honestly hard to ignore that all of this happened within a week after Maxwell was visited personally by the Attorney General of the United States. And now several ex-presidents are being shown to have been her friends. We absolutely want to hear from Todd Blanche. Look, Todd Blanche, by the way, was Donald Trump's former personal lawyer. I want to remind folks of that. And this is the same person that moved Ghislaine Maxwell from a secure facility to this kind of, club fed facility where she has roaming around. She's able to communicate, talk to pets, having secret meetings with God knows who. And so why Ghislaine Maxwell was actually moved by Todd Blanche and by Pam Bondi, I think is a really important question. And Todd Blanche has a lot to answer for because he also has been involved in the Epstein files and the way they've been released and the files that have still yet to be sent to the public and to the Congress. And so we want to hear from Todd Blanche. Attorney General Todd Blanche says that Maxwell was transferred to a lower security prison because she was being threatened and her life was in danger in the old facility. Critics online, however, say that it doesn't make sense to move her to a place with less security if her life was in danger. If anything, she should have been moved to a higher security prison. Donald Trump's lawyer interviewed Maxwell in federal prison last July after she claimed President Trump was not involved in any illegal activities. Maxwell was suddenly transferred to this prison camp. Congressman Raskin claims the whistleblower says the warden there is helping Maxwell apply for her freedom. Ghislaine Maxwell is actively seeking a commutation, a pardon from the president right now. The White House says it doesn't comment on potential clemency requests, but the president has said before of Maxwell that he has not ruled out a pardon. Some critics also question whether someone as powerful as Maxwell could even be threatened by random prisoners. Specially prepared meals, bottled water, a dog to play with. Fellow inmates are claiming that Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, is getting special treatment behind bars. This comes as the feds release 3 million pages from the Epstein files. Is Jeffrey Epstein's former girlfriend getting special treatment behind bars? There's growing outrage over reported perks being handed to Ghislaine Maxwell, now serving 20 years for child sex trafficking. Does it sound like she's getting special treatment to you? I know for a fact she's getting special treatment. Les Trent spoke to Sam Mangle, a prison consultant who has 3 clients at the same facility as Maxwell, the Bryan Federal Prison Camp in Texas. Whether it's access to a laptop computer, which is unheard of, to visits where they lock down the camp and no one can leave their bunks while she's having visitors. Allegations of other perks, according to the New York Times, include meals being delivered to her cell and being served bottled water while other inmates drink tap water, playing with service dogs, showering alone, and watching TV alone in staff-only areas. They even provided her with an umbrella to shade her from the hot Texas sun while she took her daily walks. She's been given the freedom and liberties that the other inmates do not have. Last July, Maxwell was moved from a medium security prison in Florida to the minimum security camp in Texas. This followed her meeting with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. According to reports, fellow inmates at the facility were threatened with solitary confinement or transferred to a tougher penitentiary if they voiced complaints. About Maxwell's perks. They've been told from the day she got there, do not discuss her. Do not put anything in writing. Do not talk about her on the phone. Do not make any trouble regarding Miss Maxwell, or we will move you to another location. Maxwell is scheduled to testify by video from prison for the House Oversight Committee as part of its probe of the Epstein investigation. Her lawyers say she is most likely to plead. This isn't even the weirdest part of the story. Some sources online are now claiming that the woman in prison right now isn't Maxwell at all, and she was actually swapped with a body double while being moved to the new facility. Supporters of this theory point to the lack of recent high-quality photographs of Maxwell behind bars and the extreme secrecy surrounding her transfer between facilities. Recently, Maxwell appeared in a deposition where she looked completely different. Some supporters argue that Maxwell's alleged special privileges, such as the private internet access and the ability to command guards, are not just signs of corruption, but evidence of a calculated effort to keep the real Maxwell hidden. While a look-alike serves her time, these critics suggest that her powerful connections reached into the highest levels of the Department of Justice to facilitate a swap that would ensure she never faces the true consequences of her actions, or more importantly, never has the chance to testify against the powerful figures she was friends with. Everyone that I've shown these two photographs to are understandably shocked and surprised by how dissimilar the two photographs look. The shape of the jawline has changed. The shape of the nose has changed. The shape of the upper and lower eyelids look completely different. I don't think that she somehow had cosmetic surgery during her time in prison. A lot of people would have to be involved to cover such a thing up. I agree, it sounds crazy. I'll leave it up to your audience to look at those photos and see what they think. The worst part about the situation is how Maxwell has been continuously avoiding any consequences for her crimes and is now apparently living a life of luxury. This is the same person who facilitated the abuse of hundreds of women. Emails released by the Department of Justice show that without Maxwell, Epstein would have been able to connect to the elites he was friends with. Maxwell was the one arranging meetings and recruiting more victims. One of these victims was Annie Farmer, who has spoken publicly about abuse. She says she suffered from Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell when she was 16. She testified at Maxwell's trial and proved that Epstein wasn't working alone. She's refused to have. She doesn't have any empathy or has not expressed any empathy or remorse to her victims. So I think it's highly problematic that anyone would consider negotiating with some serious criminal like this. And I think it would just really be indicative of guilt in some way because we know that she is not a credible source of information. And you say to her victims, as you know, she has repeatedly said that she had no involvement directly with actually abuse. I can speak, very personally to the fact that that's not true. She was towards me, and there's so many other crimes that she committed that she wasn't even prosecuted for. There were 4 of us that testified at her trial, but I have now met so many women who say it was because of Ghislaine Maxwell that I ended up being abused sometimes for years, and that she was at times involved in that herself. So she was a very central figure in this system. And her efforts to minimize her role have not been effective. We've seen in the files that have been released already, several places where the emails she sent are contradictory to things she said on the record before about knowing Virginia Roberts Jouet, for example, about the photo of her with Andrew Windsor. And so I think the more information